Fort Bragg, North Carolina, is one of the most important military installations in the United States. It's home to the Special Forces Command, the Psychological Operations Division, and dozens of other specialized military units. The base covers nearly 60,000 acres and employs nearly 50,000 people. It's a place where secrecy is taken seriously, where compartmentalized information is the rule rather than the exception, and where not everyone knows what their coworkers actually do. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb had been at Fort Bragg for 8 years. He worked in logistics and supply for the Special Forces Unit, a job that gave him visibility into the base's operations but not deep knowledge of specific missions or intelligence. Marcus was the kind of soldier who liked things straightforward. He appreciated clear hierarchies, clear orders, and clear understanding of who reported to whom. He did not particularly appreciate mystery or ambiguity. On a Tuesday morning in April, Marcus was walking through the main corridor of Building 847, the administrative hub for his division, when he saw a woman he didn't recognize. She was small, probably no more than 5'4", with short dark hair pulled back severely from her face. She was wearing standard-issue military PT gear, physical training clothes, and she was carrying a folder and looking at the office numbers on the doors as if she was trying to find something specific. Marcus immediately assumed she was a new recruit. This assumption made sense to him because he did not recognize her, which meant she was new. The logic was straightforward. He knew most people who worked in this building, so if he didn't know her, she must be new. He approached her with the kind of helpful attitude that made Marcus the person people came to when they needed information. "Hey there," he said, walking up to her. "You look a little lost. Are you looking for the orientation office? That's down the hall on the left." The woman turned to face him. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, but her expression was neutral. "I'm looking for room 847G, she said simply. "That's the classified materials archive," Marcus said. "You don't want to go there as a new recruit. That's restricted access. You need to finish your orientation first, get your security clearance processed, all that stuff. You're probably not authorized to be in that area yet." The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes, something that might have been amusement or might have been irritation. "Thank you for the guidance," she said, and she started walking down the corridor without asking for further help. Marcus watched her go and felt a small sense of satisfaction at having been helpful. He imagined her finding the orientation office, explaining that she was a new recruit, and being directed to the proper procedures. He had done his good deed for the day. He did not think about the interaction again for several hours. The interaction came back to his attention at around 3 in the afternoon, when he was in the break room getting coffee. His supervisor, Captain Alan Rodriguez, came in and poured himself a cup. "Marcus," Rodriguez said casually, "did you happen to see a woman in PT gear in Building 847 this morning? Short, dark hair, kind of quiet." Marcus immediately pictured her. "Yeah, I did. I think she was a new recruit trying to find her way around. I directed her toward orientation." Rodriguez's expression changed. It became one of controlled concern. "What exactly did you say to her?" he asked carefully. "I just told her she was probably looking for the orientation office," Marcus said, feeling a small flutter of anxiety. "She was trying to access the classified materials archive, which seemed wrong for a new person." Rodriguez set down his coffee and looked at Marcus directly. "Marcus, I need you to come with me right now." They walked to Rodriguez's office. Rodriguez closed the door and gestured for Marcus to sit down. "The woman you saw this morning is not a new recruit," Rodriguez said. "Her name is Commander Elena Cross. She is the chief of covert operations for this installation. She has a top-secret security clearance and has access to classified materials that both of us will never see in our entire military careers. Do you understand what you just did?" Marcus felt his stomach drop. All the blood seemed to leave his face. I didn't know," he stammered. "I just assumed she was new because I didn't recognize her." "That's the problem," Rodriguez said, and his tone was not unkind, but it was serious. In her position, Commander Cross deliberately maintains a low profile. She doesn't attend many base events. Most people don't know what she looks like. You made an assumption based on incomplete information, and you treated her like she was a junior officer who needed basic direction. What do I do? Marcus asked, feeling genuine distress. Should I apologize? No, Rodriguez said. Don't contact her. Don't acknowledge what happened unless she brings it up. The best thing you can do right now is just be professional if you ever interact with her again. And in the future, don't assume you know someone's rank or position just because you don't recognize them. Marcus left Rodriguez's office feeling a mixture of embarrassment and dread. He had been disrespectful to a senior officer, even if unintentionally. He had violated the unspoken rule that you treat everyone with basic respect until you know their actual position. And now he was mortified. He spent the rest of the afternoon feeling terrible about the interaction. The following morning, Marcus was in the supply warehouse, checking inventory on equipment that had just been delivered. He was so focused on his work that he didn't notice someone come in until a familiar quiet voice spoke behind him. Staff Sergeant Webb. Marcus turned around to see Commander Elena Cross standing a few feet away. She was in dress uniform now, a perfectly tailored uniform with insignias that marked her as a commander, a rank that made Marcus' own sergeant stripes look like nothing in comparison. Marcus came to immediate attention, his back straight, his eyes forward. Ma'am, he said, his voice tight. At ease, Commander Cross said. I wanted to speak with you about yesterday. Marcus steeled himself for reprimand. I understand you directed me toward the orientation office, Commander Cross continued, because you thought I was a new recruit. I want you to know that I'm not offended by the assumption. I actually work hard to maintain a low profile on this base, so it's not surprising that you didn't recognize me. I apologize for my presumption, ma'am, Marcus said. It was disrespectful. It wasn't disrespectful, Commander Cross said. It was actually quite helpful. Your instinct to help someone who looked lost was appropriate. The only issue was the assumption about rank. In military service, we should never assume someone's position based on appearance. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. Completely clear. Good, Commander Cross said. I also wanted to tell you that I appreciate your efforts in the supply chain. Your work keeping inventory accurate and equipment properly distributed is important. It enables the work that we do. So thank you. She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing there in shock. He had been criticized, but gently. He had been given a lesson, but kindly. And he had been acknowledged for his work in a way that suggested the commander actually knew who he was and what he did, despite maintaining a low profile on the base. Over the next several weeks, Marcus found himself paying more attention to Commander Cross. Not in a weird way, he didn't follow her or anything like that. But he noticed things. He noticed that she came to the base early in the morning, often before 6 a.m. He noticed that she worked late into the evening. He noticed that she was often in meetings with high-ranking officers, which made sense given her position. He noticed that she was quiet, professional, and seemed to generate respect from everyone around her. He also started understanding more about what covert operations actually meant. He began to realize that Commander Cross was responsible for intelligence gathering, counterintelligence operations, and classified missions that the general base population would never know about. Her low profile wasn't an accident, it was a strategic choice. The less people knew about her and her operations, the more secure those operations could be. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the initial incident, Marcus was helping to process a shipment of equipment that had been flagged as going to a classified unit. He didn't know what it would be used for, but the paperwork indicated it was for covert operations. As he was logging the shipment, Commander Cross appeared. Staff Sergeant Webb, she said, this shipment, when is it scheduled for delivery? This evening, ma'am, Marcus said. I wanted to make sure it was delivered after regular working hours to minimize visibility. Commander Cross looked at him with an expression of genuine approval. "That was good thinking," she said. "The timing does matter for security purposes. Thank you for considering that." "I've been thinking about what you said, ma'am," Marcus found himself saying. "About not making assumptions about people. I realized I make assumptions in a lot of situations, and sometimes those assumptions aren't helpful." "That's a valuable realization," Commander Cross said. "Most people never consciously think about the assumptions they make. It's good that you're thinking about it now. It will make you a better soldier." After she left, Marcus felt an unexpected warmth. He had received what amounted to a compliment from one of the most senior officers on the base. More importantly, she had validated the learning he had done since their initial encounter. As spring turned into summer, Marcus's perception of his role at Fort Bragg began to shift. He had always thought of himself as someone in a support position, doing important but unglamorous work. But talking to Commander Cross had helped him understand that every position mattered, that supply and logistics were just as critical to operations as the soldiers on the front lines. He began to take more pride in his work. He began to think more carefully about how his decisions affected others. He began to understand that respect for other people wasn't just about following rules, it was about recognizing the inherent dignity and importance of every person, regardless of their rank or role. And he had learned this lesson from a woman who, when he first met her, he had assumed was a new recruit. The irony was not lost on him. By late summer, the base was involved in a major operational exercise, the kind of full-scale simulation where multiple units participated in complex scenarios designed to test readiness and coordination. The exercise was scheduled to run for 2 weeks, and it would involve nearly every department on the base, including supply and logistics. Marcus had been pulled onto the supply management team for the exercise. His job was to track the movement of equipment and supplies as units moved through their assigned scenarios, ensuring that nothing ran out and that everything arrived where it was supposed to arrive. It was challenging work, but Marcus found he was good at it. He had developed an intuition for logistics that went beyond just following procedures. He could anticipate problems before they happened. He could see where bottlenecks were likely to form and address them proactively. His supervisor, Captain Rodriguez, noticed his competence and gave him increasing responsibility. About a week into the exercise, Rodriguez pulled Marcus aside. "There's a problem," Rodriguez said quietly. "One of our supply shipments was supposed to go to a classified unit. The unit says they never received it. But according to our manifests, it was signed off as delivered." Marcus felt a chill go down his spine. A missing classified shipment was serious. It wasn't something to be taken lightly. "Do you think someone stole it?" Marcus asked. "Possibly," Rodriguez said. "Or possibly there was a documentation error. But either way, this needs to be investigated, and we need to find out what happened to that shipment. I'm going to need you to trace the delivery path and identify where the chain of custody was broken." For the next 2 days, Marcus conducted a meticulous investigation. He reviewed all the paperwork associated with the shipment. He interviewed the person who had supposedly delivered it. He checked security camera footage from the loading areas and delivery routes. And he discovered something troubling. The person who had signed for the delivery was not the person who had actually received it. The signature was a forgery. And when Marcus traced the actual movement of the shipment, he found that it had been diverted to an unauthorized location. Marcus reported his findings to Captain Rodriguez, who immediately escalated the issue to the commander of their unit. Within hours, the situation had been escalated further, and military police had become involved. The investigation revealed that a soldier from a different unit had deliberately stolen the equipment and had altered delivery documents to cover up the theft. The equipment had been intended for the black market, and it was valuable military technology that absolutely should not have left the base. The soldier had been arrested, and the equipment had been recovered. And Marcus had been the person who had identified the problem and traced it to its source. Commander Cross learned about Marcus's work during the investigation. She made a point of finding him a few days later to acknowledge his role. Staff Sergeant Webb, she said, stopping him in the supply warehouse, I want to thank you for your work uncovering that equipment diversion. Your attention to detail prevented classified equipment from reaching unauthorized hands. That's significant work. Thank you, ma'am, Marcus said. I just noticed some inconsistencies in the documentation and followed them to their source. Most people wouldn't have noticed, Commander Cross said. Most people wouldn't have cared enough to investigate further. Most people would have just processed the paperwork and moved on. But you have an eye for detail and a sense of responsibility that goes beyond what your job technically requires. That's the difference between adequate performance and excellence. She paused, and Marcus could see she was considering something. Staff Sergeant, she continued, how long have you been at Fort Bragg? 8 years, ma'am, Marcus replied. And in that time, what have you thought about your career trajectory? It was a question Marcus hadn't really considered. He'd been content in his role, doing his job, collecting his pay, planning to eventually retire. Honestly, ma'am, I've mostly just focused on doing my work well, Marcus said. That's admirable, Commander Cross said. But I'm wondering if you've ever considered moving into a more specialized position. You have the aptitude for intelligence work, the ability to see connections, to notice when things don't add up, to investigate methodically. Those are skills that are valuable in the intelligence community. Marcus was surprised. I haven't really thought about that, ma'am. Think about it, Commander Cross said. If you're interested, come talk to me. I may have opportunities available. After she left, Marcus stood in the supply warehouse feeling like something had shifted. He had spent 8 years thinking of himself as a logistics person, and now someone at the highest levels was suggesting he might have capabilities he hadn't considered. The following week, Marcus requested a meeting with Commander Cross. She agreed, and they met in a small secure conference room in Building 847. I want you to understand what I'm offering, Commander Cross said once they were seated. If you move into intelligence work with covert operations, your life will change significantly. You'll have access to classified information that means you'll never be able to talk about your work with friends or family members. You'll be part of a small team that operates under different rules than regular military personnel. You'll be doing work that matters, but you won't be able to publicly acknowledge that work. Are you willing to accept those constraints? I think so, Marcus said. But I want to understand what the work actually involves. You'll be involved in intelligence analysis and operations planning, Commander Cross explained. You'll work with information that comes from various sources. You'll help analyze that information to identify patterns, threats, and opportunities. You'll support field operations by ensuring that teams have the logistics and resources they need. It's important work, and it's challenging. But it's also deeply confidential. Why me? Marcus asked. You could recruit anyone, and they might have more training than I do. Because integrity matters more than training, Commander Cross said. Training can be provided. But integrity, the kind of integrity that makes you investigate a discrepancy when most people wouldn't, that can't be taught. You have that quality. And I need people with that quality in my operations. Marcus thought about the past several months. He thought about the interaction in the warehouse when he had made incorrect assumptions. He thought about how Commander Cross had corrected him with kindness rather than anger. He thought about the way she had looked at his work during the investigation and seen value in it. Yes, he said. I want to do this. Over the next 3 months, Marcus was transferred to a new position. Officially, his job title was Intelligence Support Specialist within the Covert Operations Unit. What that actually meant was he was part of a small team that handled the logistics, security, and information management for classified operations. It was work that required him to sign multiple security documents. It was work that meant he couldn't discuss his day with anyone, including his wife. It was work that required him to compartmentalize information in ways that were mentally challenging. But it was also work that mattered profoundly. Marcus began to see, in classified briefings and operational updates, how the work his team did actually made a difference. He saw intelligence that prevented attacks. He saw operations that disrupted criminal networks. He saw the direct correlation between the work that happened in secure facilities at Fort Bragg and the actual safety and security of people in the field and civilians at home. He also began to understand Commander Cross better. He began to see that her low profile wasn't about being aloof or separate. It was about being completely focused on the mission. She was driven, brilliant, and deeply committed to the work she did. She was also fair and respectful to everyone on her team, regardless of rank. About 6 months after he had started working in covert operations, Marcus was involved in a situation that would cement his understanding of why Commander Cross had brought him into this work. A field team was preparing for a sensitive operation in a foreign country. The team was small, only 4 people, and the stakes were high. The operation involved extracting an asset who had been providing intelligence to the U.S. government and was now in danger. Marcus was part of the logistics team that prepared for the operation. He coordinated equipment, ensured that supplies were secure and properly packed, and worked with the team to understand their requirements. During the final preparation phase, Marcus noticed something. The equipment manifest didn't match the actual items that had been packed. Someone had packed items that weren't on the official list. And the official list was missing items that were critical for the operation. Marcus immediately flagged the discrepancy. He brought it to Commander Cross, who looked at the manifest and her expression became very serious. "Where is this equipment?" she asked. "In the secure staging area," Marcus said. "I caught it before it was shipped out." Commander Cross immediately called in the team lead for the operation. The team lead, a colonel with 25 years of experience, looked at the manifest and went pale. "We would have taken the wrong equipment," the colonel said quietly. "We would have been in the field without critical items, and we would have had equipment that wasn't necessary. This could have compromised the entire mission." Commander Cross looked at Marcus, and her expression conveyed something that went beyond standard approval. It conveyed gratitude, respect, and recognition of the fact that Marcus had just prevented a disaster. "Good catch, Staff Sergeant," she said. "This is exactly the kind of attention to detail that saves lives." After the meeting, as Marcus was leaving the conference room, Commander Cross pulled him aside. "Do you understand now why I brought you into this work?" she asked. "I'm starting to," Marcus said. "You have an eye for detail and a sense of responsibility that goes beyond what most people have," Commander Cross said. "In intelligence operations, those qualities can be the difference between success and failure, between lives saved and lives lost. That's why I recruited you. That's why you're part of this team." The field team completed their operation successfully. The asset was extracted. The mission had no casualties and achieved all its objectives. Marcus never knew the specific details of that operation, but he knew that his work had been part of making it successful. He knew that by catching a logistics error, he had made a real difference in the outcome of a real mission. And he understood, finally, that Commander Cross's seemingly quiet, low-profile position was actually one of immense responsibility and consequence. She wasn't hiding from notice. She was focused on work that mattered too much to allow herself to be distracted by the kind of visibility and recognition that most officers sought. That understanding changed how Marcus thought about power, influence, and the different ways that people could make important contributions to their organizations and their nation. 9 months into Marcus's work with covert operations, a problem emerged that would test everything he had learned about integrity, loyalty, and the complex nature of classified work. A team member, a junior intelligence officer named Lieutenant James Porter, started acting strangely. He was withdrawn in meetings. He seemed anxious when discussing certain operations. And he made a critical error in a classified report that suggested he wasn't paying proper attention to his work. Commander Cross noticed immediately. She called Marcus into her office and asked him to observe Porter more carefully during their team meetings. Marcus was uncomfortable with the assignment. It felt like he was being asked to spy on a colleague, but he understood that in intelligence work, security was paramount. If something was wrong with Porter, it needed to be identified. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus paid attention. He noticed that Porter was taking phone calls that he moved away from others to receive. He noticed that Porter was copying classified documents in ways that weren't necessary for his actual work. He noticed that Porter seemed stressed and was making excuses about needing to leave the base frequently. Marcus reported his observations to Commander Cross. "I think something's wrong," Marcus said, "but I don't know what. He might just be dealing with personal problems. Or it could be something more serious." Commander Cross listened carefully and then made a decision that would have significant consequences. "I need to bring in the Office of Special Investigations," she said. "This is above my pay grade now. But I need to do it carefully because if Porter is innocent, I don't want to destroy his career. And if he's not innocent, I need to ensure that he's investigated properly." The Office of Special Investigations is the military's investigative body for serious crimes, espionage, and security breaches. Bringing them in would trigger a formal investigation that could completely upend Porter's life. Commander Cross consulted with her commanding general and then authorized the investigation. For the next 3 weeks, OSI conducted a thorough investigation into Porter's activities. They looked at his financial records, his communications, his access to classified materials, everything. What they found was troubling but not as serious as some feared. Porter hadn't been selling secrets or passing classified information to foreign powers. But he had been copying classified documents that he wasn't supposed to have access to, and when questioned, he admitted that he had been doing so in order to help a friend who was a journalist. The journalist had been working on a story about Black Ops activities, and Porter, motivated by a misguided sense that the public should know about government activities, had been providing classified information to help with that story. It was a serious breach of security. It was a violation of his oath. It was arguably treason, depending on how the courts wanted to view it. But it wasn't the worst-case scenario, which everyone had been quietly fearing. Porter was arrested. He was court-martialed. He was convicted and sentenced to prison. His career was over. And Marcus found that he was struggling with complex emotions about the situation. He had been the one to notice the warning signs. He had been the one to report Porter's suspicious behavior. Without Marcus's observations, Porter might have continued passing classified information, and the breach could have been much more serious. But Marcus also felt guilty. He had been asked to observe a colleague, and that observation had led to the colleague's destruction. He brought his concerns to Commander Cross. "Ma'am, I'm struggling with something," Marcus said during a private meeting. "I did my job. I observed Porter, I reported what I saw, and that led to his arrest and conviction. But I feel like I participated in destroying someone's life." Commander Cross listened and then explained something that Marcus needed to understand. "Porter destroyed his own life," she said firmly. "You didn't do that. You observed concerning behavior and reported it. That's your job. That's your responsibility. What happened after that was the result of Porter's choices, not your observations." "But if I hadn't reported," Marcus began. "If you hadn't reported, he would have continued committing treason," Commander Cross interrupted. "And eventually, he would have been caught anyway, probably at greater cost. You did the right thing, even though it was difficult. That's what integrity means. It means doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when the consequences are serious, even when it affects people you care about." "I'm not sure I care about Porter," Marcus said. "But I care about the principle. I care about knowing that I was the instrument of someone's downfall." "You were the instrument of justice," Commander Cross said. "And that matters. In intelligence work, we sometimes have to make choices that are difficult and that have serious consequences. But we make those choices because the alternative, allowing breaches, allowing threats to continue, allowing people to violate their oaths, is worse." She leaned forward, and her expression became very serious. "I want you to understand something," she continued. "When I recruited you, I wasn't just looking for someone with intelligence and attention to detail. I was looking for someone with a conscience. Someone who would do the right thing even when it was difficult. Someone who wouldn't compromise on integrity, even under pressure. You've just demonstrated that quality in a very difficult situation. That's exactly who I need on my team. Marcus nodded slowly. He understood what she was saying, and he recognized the truth in it. But understanding didn't make the situation feel less heavy. Over the following weeks, life at the Covert Operations Unit continued. New people came in to fill the role that Porter had occupied. The investigation into the classified information breach was concluded. The journalist who had been receiving the information was investigated but not charged, as she hadn't technically broken any laws by receiving the information. And Marcus continued his work, with a deepened understanding of the real stakes of the intelligence business. But the Porter situation had revealed something else as well, something about Commander Cross that Marcus had only partially understood before. He realized that Commander Cross carried immense weight. She was responsible not just for operations and intelligence gathering, but for the security clearances and integrity of everyone who worked with classified information. She was responsible for catching people who violated their oaths, for making decisions that ended careers, for carrying the knowledge of all the things that happened inside the secure facilities that most people would never know about. It was a burden that would be crushing for most people. But Commander Cross carried it with quiet competence and steady purpose. One afternoon, about a month after Porter's conviction, Marcus found himself working late with Commander Cross. They were reviewing after-action reports from a recent operation that had gone well. Everything was secure, everything was locked down, and for a moment, they had a quiet minute together. "Thank you for what you did," Commander Cross said, in noticing Porter's behavior and reporting it. "I know it wasn't easy. But it was necessary, and you handled it with professionalism and integrity." "Thank you for helping me understand that," Marcus said. "For helping me see that doing the right thing sometimes means making difficult choices." "That's the job," Commander Cross said. "In this work, we make difficult choices every day. We see things that most people never see. We know things that most people never know. And we carry that responsibility quietly, without complaint, without looking for recognition. That's what we do." "Is it worth it?" Marcus asked. "Carrying that kind of weight?" Commander Cross was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Yes," she said finally. "It's worth it because we're protecting people. We're gathering intelligence that prevents attacks. We're running operations that save lives. We're ensuring that our nation is safe and our people are protected. That's worth carrying any weight." Marcus understood then why she had the low profile, why she didn't seek visibility or recognition, why she was so focused on the actual work rather than on the appearance of authority. She was focused on something that mattered more than any of that, the actual mission, the actual difference being made. And she had brought him into this work because she saw in him the same capacity to be focused on what mattered, to do difficult things for the right reasons, and to carry responsibility with integrity. That understanding would guide Marcus through the rest of his career in intelligence work. 18 months after Marcus had first met Commander Cross in the building corridor, assuming she was a new recruit, he was deeply integrated into the covert operations team. He had moved beyond support roles and was now actively involved in planning and coordinating complex intelligence operations. He had access to classified information that would seem impossible to the person he had been a year and a half ago. He had participated in briefings where world events were discussed from perspectives that the general public would never understand. He had worked on operations that involved multiple countries, multiple agencies, and multiple layers of complexity that required constant attention and analysis. And he had learned to live with classified information that he could never share, with knowledge that changed how he understood the world, but that he had to keep compartmentalized and secret. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. In late summer, a major operation was being planned. It involved an asset in a hostile country who had critical intelligence about terrorist activities. The asset was in danger and needed to be extracted. The operation would be complex, potentially dangerous, and absolutely critical to national security. Marcus was part of the planning team. He worked with the operational commander to coordinate logistics, ensure that equipment was properly sourced and secured, and plan contingencies for various scenarios. One evening, Marcus was in the Secure Operations Center reviewing the operational plan when he noticed something. The timeline for evacuation was too tight. The asset was supposed to be extracted from a location that was heavily surveilled by the hostile country's security forces. The extraction team would have only a small window of opportunity, and if they missed that window, the entire operation would be compromised. Marcus flagged the issue. He went to Commander Cross and explained his concern. The timing isn't realistic, Marcus said, laying out the specifics. If we compress the timeline to make the extraction, we increase the risk of detection. If we extend the timeline to reduce risk, we miss the window of opportunity. We're creating an impossible scenario. Commander Cross listened and then called together the operational planning team. She asked Marcus to present his analysis to the team, which included several senior officers and intelligence experts. Marcus laid out his concern in detail. He showed the timeline, the surveillance patterns, the likely response times if detection occurred. He explained the mathematical reality: the operation as planned had serious flaws. The room went quiet. The operational commander, a full colonel with extensive experience, looked uncomfortable. Staff Sergeant Webb is identifying a real problem, the colonel said finally, but this is the best window we have. The asset can only be extracted during this time frame. If we wait for a better window, the asset will be captured or killed. So we have to work with what we have, even if it's tight. Marcus understood the logic, but he also understood the danger. He looked at Commander Cross. What if we use a different extraction method? Marcus suggested. What if instead of ground extraction, we use helicopter insertion and extraction? It's faster, it reduces exposure time, and it decreases the chance of surveillance detecting the operation. There was a moment of silence. Then a senior intelligence officer spoke up. That's a good idea, she said. It increases risk in some ways, but it decreases it significantly in terms of detection and exposure time. It could actually work. The operational plan was revised to incorporate the helicopter extraction. The timeline became viable. The risk profile, while still serious, became acceptable. The operation was approved to proceed. 3 weeks later, the operation happened. The asset was successfully extracted from the hostile country. The operation went smoothly, there were no casualties, no major complications, no catastrophic failures. The asset was brought to safety with critical intelligence intact. The success of the operation was directly attributable to the extraction method that Marcus had suggested. When the after-action report was completed, Commander Cross made sure that Marcus's contribution was documented. In the classified report that would be filed in secure archives, it clearly stated that Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb had identified a critical vulnerability in the original operational plan and had proposed an alternative extraction method that significantly increased the likelihood of mission success. But the report also stated something else. It stated that without Webb's intervention, the operation might have failed, might have resulted in asset loss, and might have resulted in casualties among the extraction team. Commander Cross called Marcus into her office a week after the operation concluded. I wanted to tell you something, she said, in case you're wondering about the significance of what happened with that operation. I'm glad the asset was extracted safely, Marcus said. More than that, Commander Cross said. Your operational input prevented a disaster. The asset we extracted is providing intelligence that is preventing attacks planned for the United States. The extraction team came home safely because of your suggestion. And the intelligence that asset is providing is going to protect thousands of people. Marcus tried to process this. He had suggested a modification to a plan. That modification had led directly to successful national security outcomes. How do you live with this? Marcus asked. Knowing that decisions you make, work you do, can have this kind of weight. Carefully, Commander Cross said. And with the understanding that the weight is worth carrying because the stakes are real. Every operation we run, every piece of intelligence we gather, every decision we make has real consequences. People live or die based on what happens here. Nations are more or less secure based on what happens here. That weight is real, and it's significant, and it matters. She paused, then continued. When I recruited you, I recognized that you had the capacity to think analytically about problems, to identify issues that others might miss, and to propose solutions. That's rare. Most people don't have that combination of skills. And I knew you had the integrity to make difficult decisions for the right reasons. That's essential in this work. I'm still learning, Marcus said. So am I, Commander Cross replied. And I'll be learning for the rest of my career. Intelligence work isn't something you master and then coast. It's something you're always studying, always analyzing, always trying to improve. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you become a liability instead of an asset. Over the following months, Marcus continued to be involved in increasingly complex operations. Some succeeded smoothly. Some faced complications that required rapid problem solving. Some were aborted because the intelligence changed or the situation became too dangerous. Through all of it, Marcus worked alongside Commander Cross and learned not just the technical aspects of intelligence operations, but the philosophy and ethics that should guide that work. He learned that gathering intelligence was important, but it had to be done ethically. He learned that operations had to be planned carefully, but they also had to be adaptable. He learned that the people involved in intelligence work had to maintain compartmentalized information, but they also had to communicate effectively within their compartments. He learned that success wasn't just about the mission succeeding, it was about the mission succeeding in a way that preserved integrity and ethics. Commander Cross embodied all of these principles. She ran her operations with precision and discipline. She demanded excellence from her team. But she also ensured that her team felt valued and respected. She ran the kind of organization where people were willing to think critically and propose new ideas because they knew they would be heard and considered. This was why her operations succeeded at a higher rate than other intelligence units on the base. This was why her team was willing to take on the hardest assignments. This was why she had brought Marcus in, because she recognized in him the capacity to think, to care, and to contribute at a high level. And it was this combination that made her one of the most effective commanders on Fort Bragg, even though almost nobody knew her name or what she did. 2 years after that initial encounter in the building corridor, Marcus had been promoted to Sergeant First Class. He was now third in command of the Covert Operations Unit, and he was responsible for training new members of the team and ensuring that operations ran smoothly. Commander Cross had recommended him for the promotion. She had also, without Marcus asking, started mentoring him in the bigger picture aspects of intelligence leadership. She brought him to meetings with higher-ranking officers. She explained the political dynamics that affected intelligence work. She helped him understand how to balance the demands of different stakeholders, the Pentagon, the CIA, allied intelligence agencies, and the actual operational teams in the field. It was an education that went far beyond what Marcus's official training had provided. One afternoon, Commander Cross told Marcus that she was being reassigned. She was being promoted to a position at the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington. She would be leaving Fort Bragg in a month. Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions, pride that she was being promoted, sadness that she was leaving, concern about who would replace her. "Who will take over the unit?" he asked. "You will," Commander Cross said simply. Marcus was shocked. "I'm not a commander. I'm a sergeant first class." "You will be promoted to lieutenant colonel," Commander Cross said. "The promotion process is already underway. General Harrison is personally supporting your advancement. You have the skills, the integrity, and the understanding of intelligence operations that this unit needs. And more importantly, you have the respect of everyone on this team. They will follow your leadership." "I've only been doing this for 2 years," Marcus said. "I'm not ready." "You're more ready than you think," Commander Cross interrupted. "And you're ready enough. The people who are truly ready for leadership positions sometimes have doubts, because they understand the weight of the responsibility. The people who shouldn't be in leadership are the ones who think they're ready without any doubts. Over the next month, Commander Cross transitioned her responsibilities to Marcus. She introduced him to her contacts at other intelligence agencies. She explained the specific protocols and procedures that made the unit function effectively. She told him which decisions required consultation with higher command and which decisions he could make independently. But most importantly, she talked to him about leadership. This unit runs well because people understand that their work matters, she said. They understand that they're part of something bigger than themselves. They know that their contributions make a difference. You need to ensure they continue to understand that. Take care of your people. Recognize their work. Make them understand that what they do is important. What about the difficult decisions? Marcus asked. Like with Porter. How do you make those decisions and still maintain trust? You make them transparently, Commander Cross said. You explain why you're making the decision. You acknowledge the difficulty. And you show that you're making the decision because it's the right thing to do, not because you're trying to consolidate power or punish someone. People respect that, even if it's hard. The day Commander Cross left Fort Bragg, the entire unit gathered for a farewell ceremony. It was informal, not official, just the team coming together to acknowledge the person who had led them and shaped the unit. People spoke about her leadership, her focus on the mission, her respect for her team members. They spoke about how she had demanded excellence without being cruel, how she had made difficult decisions with integrity, how she had maintained the highest standards of security and ethics. And when it was Marcus's turn to speak, he told the story of their first meeting. 2 years ago, he said, I was walking through a building corridor, and I saw a woman I didn't recognize. I assumed she was a new recruit because I didn't know who she was. I gave her directions to the orientation office. I treated her like someone who didn't belong here, when in fact, she was one of the most important people on this base. There was quiet laughter from the group. Commander Cross could have responded with anger, Marcus continued. She could have humiliated me or reported me to my chain of command. Instead, she used it as an opportunity to teach me a lesson about respect and assumptions. And that lesson changed how I thought about people and leadership. Marcus looked directly at Commander Cross. You've done that for all of us, he said. You've challenged us to be better, to think more carefully, to take our responsibilities seriously. You've shown us what integrity in leadership looks like. And you've trusted us to do work that matters. That's a gift, and we're grateful for it. Commander Cross's expression was composed, but Marcus could see that she was moved by the words. In her own remarks, she talked about the importance of the work they did, the significance of maintaining the highest standards of integrity and security, and her confidence in the team she was leaving behind. Lieutenant Colonel Webb will lead this unit well, she said. He has the analytical mind to understand complex operations. He has the integrity to make difficult decisions. And he has the heart to care about the people on his team. That's the combination you need for leadership in this work. I'm confident that under his leadership, this unit will continue to do exceptional work. After the ceremony, as people were leaving, Marcus found himself alone with Commander Cross for a moment. Thank you for everything, he said. For seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself. For bringing me into this work. For teaching me what real leadership looks like. You did that yourself, Commander Cross said. I just gave you the opportunity. You had the qualities that mattered. You just needed to see them in yourself. Will we stay in touch? Marcus asked. I hope so, Commander Cross said. But you understand that intelligence work means our contact will be limited. We won't be able to talk about what we do or what we know. But I'll always be interested in how you're progressing, and I'll always be available if you need advice. The next week, Marcus was officially promoted to lieutenant colonel. He became the commander of the Covert Operations Unit at Fort Bragg. It was a position that carried immense responsibility and almost no public recognition. Few people outside the intelligence community would ever know who he was or what he did. But Marcus understood now that that was the nature of the work. The most important work often happened in the shadows, without recognition, without acknowledgement, without public appreciation. And that was okay. The work mattered because it mattered, not because anyone knew about it. Over the following months, Marcus made changes to the unit. Some of them were small operational improvements that Commander Cross had taught him to look for. Some of them were bigger changes to how the team approached problems and how they learned from operations. He maintained the standards that Commander Cross had established. He also brought his own perspective, his own way of thinking about problems and his own leadership style. He built on the foundation that she had created, while also making the unit his own. And he made sure that the people on his team understood why their work mattered. He briefed them regularly on how their intelligence was being used, on what outcomes their operations had contributed to, on how their work was protecting people. He did this because Commander Cross had taught him that understanding significance was what made people willing to work in demanding positions with classified information they could never share. 2 years into his command, Marcus received a brief phone call from Commander Cross. She was now working at the Defense Intelligence Agency, advising senior military leadership on intelligence operations policy. "How's it going?" she asked. "Good," Marcus said. "The unit is running well. We've had several successful operations. And the team is solid." "That's what I wanted to hear," Commander Cross said. "I know this work is demanding and sometimes isolating. But I also know that you understand its importance. Keep doing what you're doing." "I will," Marcus said. "And thank you again for believing in me when I didn't know what I was capable of." "That's what leaders do," Commander Cross replied. "We see potential in people and we give them opportunities to fulfill it. You've done that with people on your team, haven't you?" "Yes," Marcus said. "I've brought in several people who I thought had the qualities that would serve the unit well, even though they might not have seen that potential in themselves." "Good," Commander Cross said. "That's how institutions maintain excellence across generations. Experienced leaders see potential in newer people, they bring them in, they mentor them, and eventually those people mentor the next generation. That's how everything from military units to intelligence agencies to civilizations maintain quality and integrity over time." After the call, Marcus sat in his office thinking about the journey he had traveled. He thought about the arrogant assumption that a woman in PT gear must be a new recruit. He thought about how that assumption had been challenged and how it had opened his mind to a different way of thinking about people and leadership. He thought about the 2 years of mentoring, the intelligence operations he had participated in, the people he had learned to respect and work with. He thought about the responsibility of now being the person in Commander Cross's position, the person who was shaping the next generation of intelligence professionals, who was making decisions that affected national security, who was carrying classified information and understanding that came with a weight that he could never fully share. He understood now why Commander Cross had maintained such a low profile on the base. Not because she lacked confidence or authority, but because maintaining a low profile was part of the job. Intelligence work wasn't about recognition. It was about effectiveness. It was about doing the work well, maintaining security, and protecting people. The greatest leaders in intelligence work, Marcus had learned, were often the ones that almost nobody knew about. They were the people who quietly improved systems, mentored future leaders, and ran operations that made a real difference in the world, all without needing acknowledgement or public appreciation. And that was the model Marcus followed as he led his unit. He focused on doing the work well. He focused on building strong relationships with his team. He focused on mentoring new leaders who could eventually take over from him. And he made sure that everyone on his team understood that the work they did mattered, not because anyone would ever publicly recognize it, but because it genuinely protected people and advanced the security of the nation. It was a legacy that Commander Cross had given him, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through consistent, steady leadership focused on what actually mattered. And it was a legacy that Marcus was now passing on to the next generation of intelligence professionals coming up through the ranks. 5 years after that initial encounter in the building corridor, Marcus attended a military function at the Pentagon where he happened to see Commander Cross. She was now a full colonel, working in an even more senior position. She was exactly where her competence and integrity had always suggested she would end up. When their eyes met across the room, she gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Marcus nodded back. They couldn't talk openly, there were too many people around, and their work was too sensitive to discuss in semi-public settings. But in that brief moment of recognition, Marcus understood something important: the best mentors aren't the ones who need to be acknowledged for their mentoring. They're the ones who put their students forward, who let their students take credit, who measure their own success by the success of the people they've trained. That was what Commander Cross had done for him. And now it was what he was doing for the next generation of intelligence professionals. And that, Marcus understood, was the real measure of leadership, not the rank on your uniform or the recognition you received, but the positive impact you had on the people you worked with and the institutions you served. It was a lesson that had taken him 2 years to fully learn. But it was a lesson that would guide the rest of his career.